So this is called 7 Best Practices for Building a Solid Rhythm Section. So now I'm going to talk about some actual sort of practices, standards, techniques, stuff like that. And the first one we're going to look at is timing and accenting. So the idea is that I want to move away from the mechanized feel of a hard quantized beat and embrace groove templates. And you can use groove templates, or you can create your own groove templates. So obviously Ableton and Logic come shipped with a bunch of kind of grooves, and you can apply those. But I'm going to show you how I basically make a groove template. So what am I going to do first? I'm going to go File, Open Recent, open that, close, don't save.
John, quick question. Are you going to be sharing some of these slides?
I printed out the last one. I got 15 of them, if anyone wants them. Yeah, pass them around. Go away. Okay, so the idea basically is that we are sampling the timing of a break or some other rhythmic element and stamping that timing on all your patterns in your project to give the entire rhythm section a coherent, tight, and human, i.e. non-machine-like feel. So this is how to do it. So for starters, I have this project that I made earlier, and I made a beat, and here's some really great drums. And like, as you can see, you know, we got a hi-hat, we got a couple of different hi-hats, and the kick drums down here, and there's the snare, and there's a little rim shot thing, and an open hi-hat there. And if we zoom right in, you can see that everything is hard quantized, and it sounds like a machine is playing it. So we want to get away from that. So I'm going to go over to Ableton for this little exercise, and I'm going to go into my user library, and I'm going into my nicely organized sample library, drums, loops, and I have this nice folder full of classic breakbeats by this guy called Drum Addict. I just need to make sure that channel is open. And, you know, here's some breaks. So, I don't know, you might be kind of exploring your sample library, and you might hear something that you like, and I found one that I liked called Boogie Back. Can I have a bit more volume? Just up a bit, if you wouldn't mind. I'll just turn myself down, so give me some headroom. Cool. Okay, so there's a break. I like it. Sounds cool. So I'm going to just drag it into Ableton, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to control-click on it and go Extract Grooves. And so what this is doing is it's looking at the transients in that audio file, and it's going to basically make a MIDI file that is 2 bars long, because that's how long that break is, with a little MIDI note on every transient. So if I just go in and have a look, here we can see the different transients. So basically, it's made a little MIDI file that has a little MIDI note on each of these points, and it's even detecting the velocity. Okay, it's recognizing that that is louder than that. And the MIDI note that results from here is going to be at a lower velocity than the MIDI note that results from there.
Can you show those MIDI notes?
Sorry?
Can you show those?
Oh, yes, I can. See, in our groove pool, because I said extract groove, it's put Boogie Back into my groove pool. And you can just drag that into your session view there. And if I double click, there you go. There it is. Now you'll notice that it didn't, like, there wasn't really a transient here, so it didn't make a note. And there wasn't one there either. So I'm just gonna artificially kind of fill in those gaps by taking some MIDI notes that are kind of close. It's going to be a bit wonky, and later on in the exercise, we're going to kind of tidy things up a bit. But I'm just kind of filling in the gap so that I have a MIDI hit on every 16th over 2 bars. And so I now have this like sort of human this sort of human timing, basically, that's going on. And what I can do is if I put an operator or any kind of instrument on that MIDI channel, we can like listen. That beep basically represents the timing that the computer thinks that it has. Does this feel in time with the break? Kind of. It sort of feels in time. Kind of feels all right. So anyway, I made that, and that's going to be my groove template. So the next thing I do is I control-click on it, and I export MIDI clip. And I'm going to put it in my project folder. I already did it. There it is, boogieback.mid. So I'm not actually going to export it. Okay, I'm just going to hit cancel. This is just for demo purposes. So now I'm going to mute my Ableton channel so we don't hear it, and let's bring that hard quantized drum kit back, and I hit play. And I've selected all the notes, and I'm going to apply the boogie back groove template that I made. Oh, actually, I forgot to show you how to actually do that. So that would be useful for you guys. Hey, so basically what you do, just delete this, go to Finder, go to my Logic, Projects, Producers Forum. So there's my boogieback.mid object, MIDI file. And you can just, bloop, just drag it in. Come straight in, so you can just drag it in. You've now got a MIDI file. Double click on it, there are those notes. Complete with the wonky timing and the different velocities. Does anyone here use Logic? A few people, so you guys know what the red colors mean as opposed to the purple. Red means loud, purple means not loud. Anyway, so what you do is you select the MIDI object that you wish to create a groove template from, and then in the inspector in the top left under quantize, you click on that and you can say make groove template, and it will create an entry in your groove template list based on the name of that MIDI file. So let's just rename this boogieback02, and then I'm going to go make groove template, and now in my quantize list, I've got boogieback02 as an option. So let's double click in there. We're going to have a look at the notes. There they are. And I'm going to go boogieback02, and bang. They've all moved into a wonky timing, which I admit is going to sound a bit gash. Well, it's all right. So it's all kind of swung now. That's kind of cool.
Can you compare it to the hard quantize real quick?
Sure I can. I can just put quantize off. Oh, actually, that's not done it. I don't know what that's done, but anyway. There it is with quantized. Oops, excuse me. So that's without the quantize. So it's all shuffly. It's got a bit of a swing to it now, right? Which of course you could do this. You could do the same by just going 16C swing, except it's not the same. Yeah. 16C swing is exactly each note that isn't on a beat or an eighth is like delayed a little bit, right? Is swung a little bit.
And no velocity changes.
That's something else. In fact, that's more advanced than I was even going to get into, but it is actually possible to map the velocity of those templates to these notes as well. I didn't want to get in there. We're just going to kind of get too busy with it, but it's possible. Yes, quickly.
Is there something that you look for when you find a sample that you want to take?
Just inspiration. At the beginning, it's just inspiration. All it is find something that makes you feel excited, because it's all going to change anyway. What I'm doing here at the early stages of production, it's all going to get thrown away, most of it. Maybe one or two things will stick, Most of it's going to get thrown away, but the point is that it generates ideas for you, right? So anyway, like actually kind of, again, got ahead of myself. Let's put this to sort of standard 16 no swing. And I have these other sounds in the mix too. So I've got an electro kit. So this is a kind of a electro break sound, and then over here I've got a bass. So, you know, again, it's like, what does that sound like when it's all grooved? This is what it sounds like. So it's a bit more kind of, feels a bit more human. It kind of feels a bit wonky though at the end, like it sort of trips over itself a bit. So the next thing I do in this stage is I kind of consolidate the groove a bit. For one, I think that beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the bar should be bang on, because we're making dance music here, and if you're a DJ and you're mixing your track with somebody else, it's like you don't want the 2 snare drums, the 2 kick drums to be flamming. Kind of sounds a bit shit. So, okay, this is definitely on right on the beginning, I know that, but all the rest of these guys are not. You can see that they're late even when I'm zoomed out this far. So I'm just going to select all of them, zoom in, and then I'm going to apply the 1/16th note quantization, like that. So now beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 are on. And the next thing I'm going to do is basically on the upbeat, so this is 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, right there, etc. Those can be a little late. They can be a little kind of wonky. So I would keep that. That's looking a bit late for my tastes. So I'm just going to copy this one over there. And you know what? Just to make things quick, I'm going to shorten. I only need 1 bar worth of swing, one bar worth of groove quantize. That's enough. And now, okay, that's ridiculously late as compared to, say, that one. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of that. Even that one, that's kind of terrible. But, you know, this one I like the look of.
John, are you editing the groove template right now?
Yes,
so
I am.
These changes will affect.
That's correct. Because I'm just going to do yeah. Because the groove template points at this MIDI object. So if I move these MIDI notes around, when I re-quantize these MIDI patterns, they're going to move to match this. Yeah? Exactly, when you re-quantize it. So this is my consolidated, simplified groove quantize. So throughout the entire 4-bar, is it 4? Yes, 4-bar pattern, it kind of holds its groove, but it still sounds shuffly. It's pretty swung. I mean, it's very swung. Anyway, okay, so that's kind of the timing or groove quantizing part of this bit. But then the other thing is accenting. And what I mean by accenting is basically, it's pretty much about velocities. It's how hard you hit a note can give an accent or an emphasis on a certain part of the pattern. So if I go back into this pattern, any of these, they're all of these, the red means fully maxed 127 velocity. Okay, so there's no accenting going on at all. So even though I've got that swing going on, it's kind of lacking in a certain humanity. It's sort of lacking in a certain life that you can inject with velocities, especially when you're using a kit like this kit that I've got on this battery instrument here. This is just a preset kit in the battery library, and it's called Basic Kit, and it's a sampled drum kit. And the thing about sampled drum kits, let's look at snare left or maybe snare right. If I go to the mapping stage, you'll see that there's a bunch of different actual audio files in this one sample. And depending on how hard or what the velocity is of that note, it will actually play a different sample. See? So very low velocities will play a thing that was recorded being played quietly. And it's actually very effective. The human ear is really good at detecting the difference between that, if I can click on it, and that. You can hear the difference, right? And if you were to program a beat where the first snare in the bar is that sound, and the second snare in the bar is that sound, that just gives it enough interest, enough different, enough variation to make it interesting. And of course, same goes with hi-hats, kicks, toms, any of that kind of stuff. Like your velocity is probably your most powerful modulator to create interesting kits. So just gonna meet these, and let's look at this. So here I've kind of dropped the velocity on the kick drums, and I don't know, actually, to be perfectly honest, I would want this kick drum to be loud because it's beat 1. We want to accent that. But then this one just before the snare, quieter. That one just before the snare, quieter.
How are you bringing the velocity down without the velocity?
I'm using my tool. Do you use Logic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so escape to bring the toolbox, and then 9 to have your velocity tool, or escape and select it. Yep. So now I have a velocity tool, and I can select things, and I click and hold, and I drag up or down. So now, listening to this, actually I need to, that sucks. Okay, so you can hear the kind of variation in the sounds now. It's a bit quieter, but I can just turn it up. I can just rebalance it, or I could compress it, right? And okay, so there's that. But then what about a kit that isn't multi-sampled? So this electro kit is just a kit that I built. I just loaded up battery, and I put some sounds in the different cells. That sound, that sound, that sound, right? So it's like I could have layered another sample in this cell, but I didn't because I'm lazy. But there are other ways that you can use velocity to introduce interest in this sound. So for example, I can map the velocity to the cutoff, the filter cutoff, low pass filter cutoff of this sound. So I'm going to go to Effects, I'm going to go EQ filter, I'm going to turn on EQ filter, and we now have a low pass filter on my snare, right? And then under the modulation tab, I can map velocity to filter cutoff. And it's nice and high. And let's see what that sounds like. I'm just going to solo that snare and hit play. Leave this up. See how it's, yeah, the difference in velocity has created a different timbrality in that snare. What else could you do? You could also do a thing like you could map velocity to pitch on the hi-hat. So let's go tune. So velocity mapped to tune, that's going to be ridiculously strong, so I'm just going to turn that down a bit, and let's solo this. Maybe it's this one that I wanted to do that to. Velocity, come on. Velocity, tune. Let's have this up. So just, obviously this takes time. You don't rush this kind of thing, but it can make a big difference. And similarly with bass, I've done the same thing. I have, well, this preset has a, window range. This bass preset has a modulation mapped velocity to cutoff. So basically, the harder you hit a note, the more open the filter is on the bass note. So great expression right there. It's like, this is deep and dark and scary. That's loud. So you can make an exaggeration. Yeah? So you're seeing the power of velocity as a modulator, basically, right? Okay, so next one, note lengths, envelopes, and dynamics. So being aware of the duration of your sounds in a drum or bass pattern is essential to creating tight, clean drums and bass. Basically, the idea is you're not letting your sounds get on top of each other. You're controlling when they're in and when they're out. So using envelopes effectively allows you this precise control of the dynamics of your sounds and how much space they take up in the mix. And noise gates are also another very useful tool to achieve this. So I have another example. Close, don't save. Okay, so okay, so now we're into house and techno and stuff. So observe the extremely long kick drum, and also the clap is like, it's really long. It's really all over the fucking shop. And then what happens if we bring the bass line in? It's a mess. It's a total mess. Total mess. So if I just demo the electro drums again, and now what we're going to do is we are going to control the length of this kick drum, which sounds like that without any kind of volume envelope on it. We're going to control it using an envelope. So I'm going to turn the envelope on. I'm going to have the attack to nothing, so we get the transient attack. I'm going to turn, this is the important one, I'm going to turn the release to a low level. Not to nothing, but to a short level, 21 milliseconds. That's really short. And we'll put the sustain up to maximum, so we're getting the full weight of this kick drum. And let's have a listen. I'm just going to make sure that this kick drum note they're all the same length. Okay, and I'm going to have them that long. So now, because I've shortened the release time, when the note is off, the kick drum stops, right? So that's with the envelope. Oh, haha, yes, I was wondering what that was. That needs to be quiet. Well, that sounds kind of good. Never overlook a studio accident. That could have turned into something good. So where was I? Yeah. So with the envelope sounds like this. Without the envelope, sounds like this. Mess. Okay, and we can do the same thing with the clap. Again, envelope on, release down, sustain up. Now it can be short if we want it, or it can be long if we want it. So you have more control by using your MIDI notes to kind of create the expression of your drums. So this is already like a much chunkier, right? It's tighter, it's chunkier, stuff's not getting in the way. Okay, another kind of technique that I use, that you can use with layering kick drums and using envelopes as well, is basically I've got another kick drum in my battery instrument. It sounds like that. It's got the kind of high, mid-range kind of punch that I like. But, I still want the heavy subbiness of this kick drum because it's pretty badass. So what we can do is we can put a high-pass filter on this guy. And because I like the attack of it, I like the initial punch. So what I want to do is I want to have the initial attack, the initial punch of it with the low end, and then I want that low end to go away and that low end to be taken over with this sub kick. So this is how I do that. So I've selected it, go to Effects, we turn on the EQ filter, and this is a high pass filter now. And if we go to the modulation page, the modulation envelope is mapped to filter cutoff to a certain amount, and this is the shape of that modulation envelope. So what's going to happen is when this note is hit, the envelope is going to start, the filter is going to start fully open, as in the cutoff is going to be at 0. All the low end is going to be there, and then it's very quickly, at 300 milliseconds, it's going to go and open up so that it cuts out the low frequencies. And simultaneously, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to increase the attack time of that sub kick. So we now have a slowly fading in, sort of slowly. I'll bring this down a bit. But we no longer have the attack of that sub, but we just have the body of it. So now I've got the punch. I've got the punch of this kick. It's kind of hard to. You'd really sort of need good monitoring and stuff to really be able to hear the difference between that and this. But there is a difference. It's there. And with a bit more tweaking, you can really make it exaggerated. The other thing you can do is you can turn resonance really up, really high up. I got to turn that on. It's actually, that's not exactly working, but somewhere around here maybe. You can hear the movement that it's making. It's just a check, right? And then you're like, yeah, that feels like it's in the right place. Now I take the resonance down again. Or maybe you want a bit of resonance. Might help. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. I already shortened the bass notes in this pattern here as another technique to make a tighter bass and drum relationship. Instead of this one, where the notes are really long, almost played, well, they are played legato. These ones are played staccato. And maybe every other one or whatever plays legato. Just stuff like that. And then we haven't even had the velocity stuff as well. So, we can play around with the velocities. And then lots of options to create interest, create very interesting variations, right? Okay, and the other thing that envelopes are really great for, of course, is to create punch and dynamics in a sound. So let's go to this. Okay, let's use the snare drum as an example. So actually, this is useful. We can see the waveform. This snare is like loud. It's loud. It's like, ah! And then, okay, so it has a bit of a tail. But what if you only want like the initial kind of, you want like a shorter sort of spit? Your volume envelope is where it's at, basically. Because, okay, I'm going to bring the release down. So I like to have a short release so I can always control the length of my sounds. If I want it long, I can just paint it long. Have a short release. And then here's the sustain. And sustain is currently set at -6 dB, which is a good kind of middle ground. -6 dB is quieter. -6 dB is noticeably quieter than whatever it was that it's compared against, but it's not gone away. -3 is a notch. -3 dB is like a little bit. -6 dB is a certain amount that you notice. And then decay, well, let's see what happens. We put the sustain to 0. Let's put the hold to a very short time, and then decay quite short. Is that how long you want the really powerful, punchy part of your snare to be? Maybe you want it a bit longer. Let's turn the decay up. Let's turn the hold up. Bit longer now. Okay, yeah, I think that's about right. Now let's bring our sustain up to say -7, -6. And then it's all about rebalancing your sound so that snare sounds correctly balanced against the kick. But the point is that snare is now punchier. It hits and then it goes away, right? And you can do that with any sound, but it's particularly effective on percussive sounds that have slightly longer sounds, like a kick drum, or a bass. Again, if you're finding that your bass doesn't punch, then this is the way to do it. Use volume envelopes that take your sustain down to a kind of a 75% level. Right, and then the other thing that's kind of useful are noise gates, because, oh, piss off. Yeah, noise gate. So here I've got this thing. I programmed these drums. It kind of sounds like a break, and it's just nice to have a natural sounding kit in there. Let's turn a noise gate on. Now it's just like everything's short. I could go into battery and I could change the envelope of each one of those sounds that I'm using. This might take a while, so I'm just going to use a noise gate and make things short. Yeah, so that's what I've done there, and in the mix. Okay, right, next one is tuning. So basically all your sounds in your productions, even drums and percussive sounds and hi-hats and rides and all that stuff, they all have a pitch. They actually have, they play a note, they sing. You don't notice it because they're short, but they actually have an inherent pitch. So tuning your drum sounds to be in the right key or like in a pleasing interval with the key of the song is going to help those sounds blend with the rest of the sounds in the mix. Why is that? Because harmonically sympathetic frequencies in the audio spectrum mesh more readily than those that are dissonant. And this is my theory anyway. So when you've got sounds that are harmonically in tune with each other, even if they're just drum sounds, that will help them sit in the mix better than if they're not in tune with the rest of the sounds and they're clashing. Right? So, yeah. So basically, I'm going to demonstrate that. So this is already sounding quite good, but let's go back to, say, this part of the arrangement, and I'm going to solo the bass so I remind myself what the key of this track is. It's in that key, whatever that is. And then now let's go to battery. I just, you know, use your ears, right? Yeah, it's in this key. Something like that. Boo. So it needs to come down, right? If you're not sure, you can like tune it up a lot. Sort of. Okay. So what key do we want to be in again? Nope. Right? Sorry, guys. So I'm going to bring it down 4 semitones.
Take notes, guys.
That's now in key, isn't it? Right? That's in the tonic of that bass line, right? So what's 8 minus 12? Somebody? -4. Let's bring it back down to -4. And I'm just going to mute this other bass drum because we need to do that one too. And I'll just unsolo. Now, you can't even hear that. You can't even hear that that kick drum is in the right key, but I promise you it makes a difference. I swear to you it makes a difference.
Hey, Jeff?
Yes.
The 5-minute.
Oh, fuck. I'm so far away. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to like push on to something else.
Adam's gonna,
But basically what we'll do is when our hosts arrive, which is fairly soon, I'm guessing.
Right now.
No, I think we're close. But, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, we're sort of over the hump. Okay, the next bit I was going to talk about is choosing the right sounds, and there's really not much to demonstrate with this. I'm just going to say it. If you're layering stacks of plugins, EQ, and compression over your sounds to force them into sounding the way you want them to, the chances are that they weren't the right sounds to begin with in the first place. If a kick drum or snare isn't working in the mix, you should be cycling through your sound library and swapping out those sounds for a different sound, because you never know, some other kick drum in your sound library is just going to work better. You don't even know why. Or maybe you're having a kind of a jazzy, funky feel to your track. Well, maybe a real kick drum might sound quite good in that, so perhaps you should choose a real kick drum. And battery, if anybody uses battery here, battery has an extremely useful function which allows you to just, I want to hear the next sample in the folder that I took that sample from. Next. And so on. Oh, that works. Great. Carry on, right? Yeah. And the other thing to mention is that sometimes a sound that once worked when you were building a track will stop working in the context of new content that has been added into your production. E.g., a new bass line that you added is clashing with the old kick drum. Well, do you want to keep the bass line or do you want to keep the kick drum? Probably want to keep the bass line. Choose a new kick. So yeah, aim for minimalism is at the content generation stage, especially when it comes to processing and effects, for the sake of your CPU and for the sake of your head, and to keep the project more manageable, right? If you've got stacks and stacks of plugins to try and make your things sound the way you want them to, then I think you're just kind of like bashing your head against the wall. And you're killing your CPU. So yeah, take your time choosing and designing your sounds and don't be in a hurry. Working quickly is not necessarily better or a good thing. The only time it is important to work quickly is when putting your initial musical or rhythmic ideas down in the sequencer. So sound design takes time. Relax and take your time. All right. Do I need to rush?
You're good. I think we can do at least another 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Is anyone bored?
I'd like to hear more about your thinking process.
Well, I've moved on. Sorry.
That's too bad. Mostly the vocal section. Actually.
Well, I mean, obviously vocals are or are not in key.
Mainly just going.
Oh, right. Well.
I was trying to be funny. I'm sorry.
Oh, I see. Oh, you wanted to hear me sing again.
Thank you.
Right. I was in a choir once, a children's choir.
And then you turned 12, right?
Yeah, no, my balls dropped. Yeah. Right. Solo, balance, rebalance. Okay. So this stage I'm calling solo, balance, and rebalance. So inevitably, when you're producing a track, we get bogged down as we add more and more sounds and ideas into the mix. So when you get to a point where you feel that you are hearing sounds, where what you're hearing sounds muddled and tiresome, it's time to bring all your faders down and rebalance your track. This is in the middle of your production. You're not finished. You're nowhere near finished. But it's a very therapeutic process, I find. I just need to load something in Ableton here. Okay, so fingers crossed this is going to work, because this is a much more complicated project. This is a track I was working on a few weeks ago or a week ago. And let's cycle this range here. Is it going to play? Okay, so I'm just going to solo my drums post and bass post channels. So here we've got some sounds going on. And basically, the idea is, say I'm working on this track and I'm not there yet. I don't have all the sounds in that I want, and I'm kind of a little lost. There's this great process of just zeroing your faders and starting again. So my drums and bass are soloed. I'm not going to look at melody and atmospherics. Okay, we're just doing drums and bass. And over here on the left are all those submix channels I was talking to you about. Kick, snare, percussive, drums effects, and then ditto the different bass channels I got going on. So I'm just going to select all of these, and I'm going to bring the faders right down. So we now got nothing. Okay, and so a good thing to start with is probably your kick drum, because we're making dance music, right? So hit play. There's my kick. I'm going to turn my master up. So, it's all about balance, rebalance, balance, rebalance. I want to leave some headroom here for my kick, because maybe I might want to boost it a little later in this balancing process. So here we are, we're peaking at minus 3.9. That's nice and healthy. Bit of headroom if you need it, but it's good. So then what would be the next thing that you kind of bring your bass, your drums, your kick drum with is probably your bass. So here's my kind of primary bass channel, the virus. And there we go. Okay, I'm just going to move us into an area of the track where it's playing all the time. So obviously this is not my studio or anyone's studio, so monitoring here isn't great, but if you're in your studio and you're in the zone, you've brought your bass up against your kick and you've got a better feeling of what both those sounds actually sound like. Because you haven't listened to those sounds soloed for I don't know how long. You've been EQing them, you've been changing the sounds, I don't know what you've been doing, but these sounds, maybe it's a good time to get familiar with them again. So the soloing, the kind of like rebalance stage is great because, oh, now I can hear what my kick drum sounds like. Now I can hear what my kick drum sounds like with my bass. Oh, now I know what I should EQ my bass with, to kind of make it fit better.
Yeah, John, do you have sidechaining?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're getting there. That's sort of the next bit of power. So yeah, it's basically like, okay, so that's kind of nicely balanced, and let's bring the snare in now. Sounds all right. Let's bring the percussion up. That feels nice. It's like that's a new mix now, and you feel refreshed. It's like you don't hate your track anymore. It's like, oh, I like it again, just by doing that. And then I've got this drums effects channel, and well, that kind of, I've got a bit of reverb. I've got a bit of reverb on this drums effects channel, and that kind of brings things to life too. So I've mixed that up. Oh, I like the way that sounds. Yeah, and also doing this kind of stuff, especially when you're working, or when I'm working with the percussion channel, if I'm kind of having trouble with my percussive elements like my hi-hats and stuff, this is great to get a feel for where your different sounds should be in the stereo spectrum. So I'm not going to go through and start from scratch because there's a lot of different elements, but like the hi-hats, for example, I'd start with them and I go, oh, I want this hi-hat to be here, and I want this hi-hat to be over here, and then I want this other sound to be centered, and I want this sound to be here. And by only listening to the percussion channel, you get a really nice feel for how the different sounds should be balanced and spread across the stereo spectrum. And then when you mix everything back in, you've just got a nice coherent mix. Blah. Okay. Okay, here's one maxim or precept or just standard by which to live your production life that I would like you to take away with you tonight, and it's this. The most important tool that you have at your disposal is not an EQ, it's not a compressor, it's not a filter, it's not a distortion, it's the volume fader. This is the most important thing in your whole production is right here. It's gain and level. The balance of your sounds chosen appropriately, as in you've chosen the right sounds, sequenced to allow room for expression. This is all the stuff we've already talked about. And at the appropriate pitch, that's also very important, the balance is the most powerful mechanism you have to create a great overall sound. That sounds like a really obvious thing to say. That's what mixing means, but people forget about that. People forget that the volume level, the relationship between that kick to that snare to that whatever is like very, very important. And I think people forget about it because they're still kind of trying to make sound sound good, or they're trying to make it sound bigger. It's balance. It's balance. Okay, so I haven't touched EQ or compression, right? And the reason is because you shouldn't be using EQ and compression as a crutch to make your stuff sound good. You can make your stuff sound good without EQ and compression, and you can use EQ and compression at the end to really sweeten things. To I use EQ as a corrective tool. I cut far more than I boost, right? I use it a little bit as an enhancer, but most of the time I'm cutting things away. Cut things away that you don't need and then turn it up. That's the same thing as boosting that frequency. Oh, I'm boosting at 6K. Well, you could just cut all the shit away below 6K and turn it up. I just kind of think if you're boosting frequencies, you're forcing. Yeah. You're pushing things to do things that they're not really supposed to do. And as for compression, to me, it is an automated tool to create dynamic expression. And by dynamic expression, I mean the difference in volume between certain sounds, right? Or to create room in the mix through sidechaining. So compression, I find, is overused as a tool to enhance the overall impression of loudness, and instead should be used sparingly but effectively. It's not that I'm against compression to make things sound loud, it's just that too many people use too much compression to make things too loud. Right, this is where my notes kind of run out, and I'm really winging it. But so submixing and sidechaining, and I think this is pretty much nearly the end. So you were asking about sidechaining, and then I was explaining earlier about the whole bandwidth, splitting the different submixes into bands. So this is where this stuff really comes into play. So here we have bass low, bass mid, bass high, and drums low, drums mid, drums high. Well, okay, over here my drums low, actually I didn't because it's already mono, but I'm gonna make, oh no I did, sorry. That little circle there means it's mono. That's a mono track, whereas these guys here are stereo. So my low end of my drums has been forced into mono, and the low end of my bass has been forced into mono. The mid-range of my bass, I have a compressor on it. And what is it doing? Here's the compressor. We're looking at the compressor on the mid-range of all my bass. And it's actually really dramatic. I'm cutting 10 decibels. I'm cutting 10 dB out of the mid-range. But you don't notice it, because the snare drum is filling that frequency. The snare is going clack, and then the bass comes back to fill it, right?
How come you still see the left and right channels of the mono track?
I don't know.
Because you're EQ.
Yeah, you're right. Because this, yeah, very good. Thank you. Because I added that plugin before I turned that to mono. I don't think it makes any difference.
I just have never been able to do that. Like, have that happen.
Right. Yeah. I think that's because when I first put the linear phase EQ on that channel, it was a stereo channel. We can check it. No plugin. Let's turn that. Oh, you know what? I think the reason is because the source channel, the input channel, or maybe the output channel is stereo. No. Maybe, yeah, I have to take this off too. Hey, there we go. Now I have to add them again.
Right.
Oh, well. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I don't think it makes any difference at all. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of it, really. Again, I do the same things with the mid-range of my melody bus. I also have a compressor maps to the snare drum, or something that does what the snare drum does. It's not actually the snare drum. It's like a dummy. It's a dummy that plays a rhythm that the snare drum plays, and that's what my sidechain compressor keys to.
Without making a sound?
Without making a sound. No output. Here they are. Oops. Here they are, key 1 through 4. So I have four dummy synthesizers, ESM, simple synthesizers, and in the output, I've set them to buses because you have to use buses for sidechaining. This is deep logic shit. But over on the buses, wherever they are, in fact, they're not in the arrangement because they're not in the mixer because they're not in the arrangement. I would have to go to my environment to find them. Where are the buses? Probably. Oh boy. You'll just have to take my word for it. You just kind of click and hold and say no output. And then there's no output, but the audio still goes in, and that's what your compressor reads. Your compressor is reading the audio going in. Okay, so the last thing I just wanted to mention, the last in the stage, is space. So I like to put a bit of reverb on just about everything, because has anyone ever heard of the concept of 3D mixing? Nobody? Okay, you've heard of it. So basically, 3D mixing is the concept of you have 3 dimensions. You've got panning, left and right. You've got frequencies, up and down. And you've got time, front to back. Front to back, right? And then you've got, obviously, balance. So it's like almost as if your different sounds are dancing in 3D space. And you're here, and there's a box around your head. Having reverbs and delays fills out the time spectrum, or the time dimension, the Z space of your mix. So having a bit of reverb on your drums bus, which I have, really helps to just, I mean, for one, it just feels nice and natural. Obviously, use a very short reverb time. Very, very short decay time. I have a very short decay time here. I always use this impulse reverb plugin, which sounds very nice, sounds very natural, and then just make it really short. It just brings your kind of drums to life, and then you can do all sorts of, you can compress that, which I have. So I've got 2 compressors. I've got one compressor that's sidechaining against the kick, and then I've got another compressor that's just actually compressing the audio. I don't really use very much compression. I just balance. I make sure I think, because like Drew was saying, all these samples that you get in these packs, they're limited. Yeah. All these sounds that you've got already have compression on them. You can get a solid mix just through balance. Any questions?
When you're doing your rebalancing, you personally, are you working towards any specific level, like -6 or anything?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So yeah, pretty much I am. So this is what I might do. I'm just going to get rid of the bass, and we're just dealing with drums here. I'm going to put that back to 0 decibels and hit play, and so basically in each level of the chain, I'm sort of going for roughly -3. So at this level in the chain, I'm going for roughly -3. And then at the next level in the chain is this drums pre-channel. So where are we at there? 1.9. So I might bring this down a bit. It's a very good question. And then here we have my 3. Well, these I tend to keep at the same level because I don't yet want to exaggerate the bass of my drums, but I can. That's another great thing about this 3-bus the multi-band thing is you can just have more of the low end in your kit, your drum kit, which is not the same as boosting the EQ in the low end. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's just not. You can compress that. I can put a compressor on this. You can't do that with an EQ on the whole drums mix. So yeah, I go for roughly -3, and then now I'm looking at the next stage in the chain, which is over here, my drums post. So this is healthy. This is healthy. My master is at -3. I can put that up. For now, I can put that up because I want it to be loud, and then I can start bringing other things in. And so once we get to a point where it's kind of getting a little too hot, then we just bring the next level in the chain down. So we're just kind of keeping everything nice and clean. That's the other thing. I don't like to see people driving their channels. Like, okay, it doesn't distort, but it's not good practice. And your compression, for one thing, your compression, if you're sending too much level into your compressor, then it doesn't matter how high you put the threshold, it's always going to compress. So it's not good practice. It's good practice to keep everything clean, right? Anyone else? Okay, we're done.
All right, well, have a round of applause.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.